All right, we need to look at our groundwater, and we've talked about water cycles, so you guys are familiar with the fact that precipitation, when it comes down, can go two different ways. So let's look at where we're going to write that down. You need to go over to the table and make sure that you've got your worksheet, and then we're going to fill in our worksheet. So as we look at what we need to fill in on our worksheet here, let's look at our terms that are down here, and let's look at where we need to fill them in on our diagram. All right, so let's start right here. We've got our precipitation, and so we've got our rain, we've got our precipitation that's coming down to the Earth's surface, and we know that it can go two different ways. It can run off, and so that's going to become our surface water. And we see our body of water here. That might be a river or a stream. It might be a lake or a pond. And then we see our water here that's going to infiltrate down into our earth, and this is going to become our groundwater. Now, water is going to flow downward through the permeable soil, the soil that has openings in the pore space, and the water is able to go down through those openings, and it's going to filter all the way down until it hits an impermeable layer, and then it'll start to fill in that space. So we see right here at the bottom, this part right here is fully saturated, and so this is going to be called our zone of saturation, and we see here that the water has completely filled all the spaces in between the particles of the soil and the rock. The spaces are 100% full. They're 100% saturated. Now, above this level right here, this water table, above this level, we notice that the water is filtering down through here, and some of the water is going to adhere and stick to those soil particles. And we're going to see that this zone is not completely saturated. There is water there, but there's also air in some of those pore spaces. And so this is going to be our zone of aeration because it contains water and air. And we see our plants here, our plant roots are in this zone, okay? But if we were going to put in a well, we would want to make sure our well is going to go well down into this zone of saturation. All right, pause the video here and go pick up your worksheet off of the table about aquifers and groundwater. When you're done filling out this paper, then you can unpause the video. So pause the video. All right, unpause the video. We're going to go over the answers to the worksheet that you just filled in on your own. All right, so we look once again here and we see our precipitation falling here on the land, and we've got our runoff, and we've got our infiltration. We've got our water flowing down into the soil, and we've got our plants here that are soaking up our water. This top area of the soil is going to be called the zone of aeration. Remember, that's the area that has some water in it. You can see the water molecules here, but it also has some air in it because it's not completely saturated. Below that, though, the water has filled in from this impermeable. The water has filled in, kind of like filling up a sink or filling up a tub. And the water is filled in here, and we've got this zone of saturation all the way up to the water table that shows the spaces where it is completely full of water. So if we're looking to see where our groundwater is right here in this aquifer, in this zone of saturation. So we've filled it up all the way to this point, to this water table. So when we look at groundwater, we know that groundwater and surface water are coming from the same precipitation. If it's runoff, it's going to make surface water. If it infiltrates, it's going to make groundwater. Now, groundwater, because it's underground, we got to figure out how do we get to it. Well, sometimes the land drops off and that groundwater is exposed at a natural spring or a geyser, but we know how to get down to it using man-made wells. Well, let's look at these wells. Okay, so we see here this one well, this is only going down into the zone of aeration. So it's not going to hit very much water. That's not a good placement. This well, though, this is perfect. It goes all the way well down into that zone of saturation. It's going to have access to a lot of water. This well, though, is down into that impermeable rock. So there's no water down there because that's solid rock. They've drilled down too deep. So B is your best place to put your well. When we look at our water table, we know the water table, just like the water cycle, water doesn't stay in one spot. It's constantly moving. So we see here that our water table is going to rise and fall with our precipitation and also with use. So we can see here that a drought would lower the water table, and a long steady rain that would refill up the water table, and that's going to make it rise up higher.